Hello and a warm welcome to Mark Langdon's Bets Club, your one-stop shop for football betting insight. It's Jack Reeve, it's Mark Langdon back once more to guide you through another week of footballing goodness. We've got Champions League football to look back on, a full Premier League card to get through. And as always, Dan Childs will be joining us for his EFL team in focus and his best bets. Mark, it feels only right to start in the Champions League, I think. And let's talk about Newcastle, who have put up one of the most historic nights in their history.
Yeah, they were absolutely brilliant against Paris Saint-Germain. Very brave without the ball, pressed PSG so high. And that's where the first goal comes from, really, where they hunt down Marquinhos and he sort of chips it into midfield and they're able to score from that. It was just relentless that first hour. Paris had started okay, but once they went one behind, really didn't have any answer to what Newcastle were doing. They played at just an intensity that was too much for PSG. And I think we talk about the money quite often, and the ownership and sort of the questions over that. But if you look at three of those goal scorers from last night, you've got Dan Burn, Longstaff, and then Fabian Schär. Those are not players that have cost £100 million. They were with Newcastle, or could have been with Newcastle, whoever the owners were. Probably feel quite like Mike Ashley type players, if you want. So I think Eddie Howe needs to take a lot of credit, really. They weren't very good 2 weeks ago against Milan. They were completely overawed by the occasion. They were lucky to get the draw. This was different, and I know they're at home, and home advantage means a lot in the Champions League. But I thought it was a fantastic first hour. I mean, if we do want to sort of pull apart Paris Saint-Germain, like their team selection was ridiculous. Playing 4-2-4 at St James's Park just meant that they were a player short in midfield. I have no idea why Luis Enrique dropped Vitinha and ended up with Muani and Ousmane Dembele either side of Gonzalo Ramos and Kylian Mbappe. It was too much, and they couldn't play out, but they weren't able to play out because Newcastle were all over them. There were lovely stories, Dan Burn and Longstaff, both Newcastle supporters. That is the sort of stuff that the fans dream of, isn't it? Really, and Dan Burn is. Yeah. He's not the sort of player that you like as an opposition because a supporter, because he can be he's not afraid of putting his boot in, and he'll dig you in the ribs if he thinks that you need to have it. But it was a lovely moment for him to score that goal. I mean, for Dan Burn to be a hero on a pitch where Kylian Mbappe is playing just feels sort of, I don't know, it just feels weird. But it feels good as well. Well done to Newcastle.
Absolutely. A brilliant night for Newcastle. Quick word on PSG, Mark, who I know you were keen on at the start of the tournament. I mean, it struck me, you mentioned the kind of lack of midfield, just a complete lack of physicality. Mbappe didn't look particularly fit. I guess it's understandable with his lack of pre-season. Can they bounce back from this, or is it going to be a turbulent Champions League campaign for them?
Yeah, I mean, they could still bounce back. I mean, it's a really tight group, isn't it? And like I say, they've got home advantage means a lot in the Champions League. So they've already won one of their home games. I don't expect them and Newcastle to play exactly the same way when the two teams meet in Paris. I mean, it might be that PSG are all over Newcastle. They've got the two critical games coming up now from a PSG point of view against, they've got these games against Milan that. Because I think Dortmund are the worst team in the group, probably sort of slightly fortunate to get that 0-0 against Milan as well. So they've got feels like almost like a knockout game before the knockouts against Milan. And I'd still take PSG to come out on top in those two games. They just need to get back to kind of, that team that played against Borussia Dortmund was absolutely fine. I don't know why you would force the issue to such an extent, because you play with four forwards, you think you're being very aggressive. What it means is they can't get the ball because you've got nobody to give them the ball. And that's where the first goal comes from. Marquinhos looks around. They've only got two midfielders and four players up the pitch. So he tries to kind of sort of bypass that midfield area, if you like. Very strange. Luis Enrique said after the game that, it's on him. he didn't kind of expand on that. But yeah, I blamed him for it. Yeah.
Contrasting nights for Manchester City and Arsenal in the Champions League. We'll get on to their midweek games shortly when we preview the big match. They of course face each other this weekend. A word on Manchester United, Mark, whose season goes from bad to worse. Just a comedy of errors, really, for the Galatasaray goals. And they're in all kinds of bother in that group now.
They really are, yeah. Well, they're 7-4 to qualify. Ten Hag is second favourite in the next manager to go market. It's hard to kind of come up with new things to say about what's gone wrong at United, and they have got injuries, and it was a very unfamiliar back four that played in that game. But Anana's making big mistakes, which is not ideal when the manager's put so much faith in him. Just all over the pitch is not working. Apart from up front, you could say Højlund had he actually looked the part. And I suppose if you're United, you're clinging on to the fact that might be one that they've got right. But I mean, just so much wrong at the moment. The team just is not functioning in any area. Even down to the chance where Rashford should pass to, or either should score or pass to Bruno Fernandes, and he kind of doesn't make the right sort of pass or the right decision. The forwards are not playing well together. The midfield looks way too open. The defence has got injuries, but is conceding far too many goals. The goalkeeper looks shaky. The manager looks bewildered by what's going on. Absent owners, questions about sort of the kind of director of football. The CEO, sort of question marks over how he sort of handled situations in the summer. I mean, what is actually going well?
A ticket office that don't work either and don't understand the difference.
A roof that's leaking.
Home ends and away ends. I mean, I love the clip of the Galatasaray fans letting off flares in the home end. What's going on?
I mean, as I've sat in home ends of sort of away European games. I mean, there are means and ways, Jack, of getting hold of tickets in such environments.
I bet you didn't let off flares though, did you?
I didn't. I mean, that's you. I'm pretty sure that's not my style. Yeah.
From one calamity to another, let's talk about VAR, Mark. You've had this kind of smile on your face for the entirety of this season, and it's probably because of Spurs' good form and you being in my company. Spurs with another win against Liverpool. Whether it should have been a win is up to you to decide. I certainly know Jurgen Klopp's answer. Jurgen Klopp has said, whether it was tongue-in-cheek or not, that he'd like the game to be replayed. We've seen the goal. We've seen that it shouldn't have been given as offside. I mean, what do you make of all of this? Because we've had VAR around for long enough now. There are flaws and there are benefits, but to be this deep into a system and still not have coherent processes in place does seem a worry.
Yeah, I think a lot of things at play. I mean, first of all, as just a neutral observer, obviously I was in the stadium on Saturday. I wasn't a neutral observer, and so just one of the things. If it goes for you, you kind of smile and think, well, there'll be bad decisions somewhere along the way that will kind of even itself out, even if that's not true. That's sort of just what you think, and so sympathy for Liverpool, because they did score a good goal. They lost in like heartbreaking circumstances. Probably deserved something out of the game, and I think that has fueled the fire, really. If they'd lost 3-1, 4-1, probably wouldn't have been such anger over it. Totally disagree, though, with Jurgen Klopp in terms of replaying the game. I mean, that would set a dangerous precedent, really, for every time there was officiating errors, however obvious that they are. Because last season, let's not forget, there were a couple of instances where VAR wasn't used correctly. I remember Arsenal against Brentford, where they drew the line on the wrong player. Now that's a different type of error, but Arsenal were in the midst of a title race at that moment. I don't remember as much fuss over that, and that was a different kind of scandal, but still one that shouldn't happen. So you know, I don't have sympathy in terms of wanting the game to be replayed. You know, I do think though that they need to learn in terms of the processes. You know, I think it's very easy for us to sort of even 10, 20 minutes afterwards, a day after, a week after, to say even 20 seconds in, they could have stopped the game and given Liverpool a goal. Because I think that that's probably what should have happened. But in the moment, I think, you know, people freeze. You don't always react great in sort of what is a crisis situation. So I think it's understandable that they didn't come to that conclusion straight away. And if you don't do it straight away, you can't start doing that 5 minutes later. I think that the process needs to be clearer. Having heard like the audio
It's just wild, wasn't it? It's like sort of
too many voices,
studio, yeah.
Too many people kind of, you know, who's in charge of this. It felt like the person who was drawing the replay, the offside lines, he knew that something had been a mistake, but didn't feel empowered enough to maybe speak up and at the moment and go, stop. I think surely you just say, like, the referee or whoever it is says, you know, we've disallowed a goal. Can you check that it's right for this goal to be disallowed? And then the person that's ordering VAR says, yes, it's, you know, correct decision, offside. You know, not this check complete and no kind of what does the check result in. I mean, it's not going to solve VAR, because I think the whole process of it really is it's been brought into football without enough thought process into whether it would work or not. But at least you can only learn from mistakes, really. You know, once it's happened, you're not much you can do. And, you know, when I'm sort of speaking to the team at Racing Post, if a mistake's made, whether it's by me or one of the team, we talk about how the mistake happened and how do we sort of it not happen again. And so I think you can only improve processes. So hopefully they do that. I don't think the audio needed to be released. I think it embarrasses people that are probably already feeling embarrassed. But
is it not good to understand what's going on though, Mark? Because it does make it clear how these mistakes do happen.
Yeah, well, then we'll do it all the time. All I'm saying is don't do it just because Liverpool have made a fuss over it. You know, I think it would be better to have the audio there, because then you would understand, well, look, that penalty decision has not been given because they've decided that, you know, there wasn't enough contact, or they're both pulling and pushing each other. It would still mean that people would moan. They wouldn't stop people from moaning, but hopefully the kind of more sensible mob in the crowd, you know, in terms of those that are watching it on TV or whatever, can at least understand why a decision was made. We can now understand how they've got it wrong, but it took, you know, Liverpool to kind of kick up a fuss, and one stage they were sort of almost suggesting sort of sporting integrity, weren't they? Which I think is quite harsh.
A good win for Spurs, nonetheless. They travel to Luton this weekend. We'll be getting stuck into the Premier League action now. Let's start with our big match. It's Arsenal against Manchester City. This one, Sunday, 4:30. Arsenal 2-1, 23-10 the draw, 11-8. Manchester City. Mark, Manchester City coming unstuck for their first time this season, at least in the league, against Wolves last weekend. Arsenal maintaining their unbeaten start. This is an intriguing one to look ahead to.
Yeah, it is, absolutely, Jack. I think, you know, Arsenal getting beat by Lens in midweek wasn't that big a deal. In the grand scheme of things, they should still qualify. It's just to what extent is Saka's injury and whether he's going to be able to play in this game a problem. I was going to say Ramsdale, the Raya mistake. Sorry, you get so used to Ramsdale being in goal. You know, how does the dressing room react to the kind of Arteta's really big decision? You knew it was coming. As soon as you know things didn't go perfectly for the goalkeeper, people would start going, well, you know, why have you done this? Have you done the right thing? So I think the result in Lens doesn't matter, but the injury to Saka could be massive. You know, he's one of Europe's best players, such a danger, whether that's assists, just occupying defenders, scoring goals. And I do think that Arteta has overplayed him. I don't think that's being wise after the event. I think people have been saying this for some time, that he needs to be rotated. I think, you know, Bournemouth game, he was a doubt for that, and he plays, and he has to come off, and then he plays again in France, and he might be all right for this Man City game, but I just don't think that that's the right way to manage a young player, really, because at some stage, even if it's not on Sunday, Saka's going to end up with injuries based on just the sheer workload, and so yeah, I mean. The other bit about Arsenal's defeat was they didn't react very well, I suppose. And Arteta's substitutions do get called into question because he can be quite like random and chaotic with the amount of changes, and he kind of throws everything in the air to try to sort of pull it around. And I do think he's maybe too impulsive with his subs, but not great night for Arsenal, but I think they'll be okay. As far as City beating Leipzig, perfect response to what happened at Molineux, and the team selection going for Rico Lewis in midfield looked a strange one, I suppose, at the time. I mean, he's the best player on the pitch by an absolute mile in that game. I know you weren't watching it, Jack. You were watching your beloved Norwich City, but I can promise you that Rico Lewis put in a kind of 9 out of 10 performance, really, and has put himself in contention to start this game because City deserved to beat Leipzig apart from like a 15-minute spell just after half time. They completely dominated the game. Haaland missed a couple of chances and maybe not firing on all cylinders at the moment. Does it matter when Julian Alvarez can come off the bench and put one into the top corner?
Well, I was about to say that, Mark, because obviously Haaland is Haaland. We know all about him, but there is this thing going on of like Alvarez is going under the radar here. And I don't think it's going to. I don't think people are going to fully take note until he's on 25 goals this season, and then we go, "Oh, blimey, yeah, like he's probably like the main man there now. He's scoring goals, and all of them are really good goals as well."
Yeah, he seems like that top corner is like a magnet to his boot. I know the one against Leipzig, slight deflection, but he just seems to find that top corner with frightening regularity. I think I've said it before, but if he was on the market, he'd probably be playing up front for like Real Madrid, and City's. You would call him second choice striker, but he's played himself into such a position now that Pep's having to move the team around slightly to accommodate him into the team because he's too good to be left out of the side. Whether that's impacting slightly on Haaland's sort of overall return, and he's still chipping in with goals. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But I don't know, doesn't feel quite as frightening now as what he did last season. Maybe we just take him for granted that, he scores a goal against Nottingham Forest and you don't even count it as a goal almost. And you're wanting 2, 3, 4 from him every week. But his sharpness doesn't seem to be 100% yet. And I think you can say the same about Grealish as well, because he's not sort of played much this season. John Stones has obviously had his injury. So they're trying to find their way. I don't want to write sort of City off yet because this time last season they weren't in top gear, and by the end of it they won the treble. So I think they are a team that sort of grows into the season, but probably a good time to be playing them with Stones not 100%, Haaland not firing on all cylinders, Rodri suspended as well, De Bruyne's out. Gundogan would have, you think last season, Gundogan, Kevin De Bruyne, Rodri, City's best midfield, none of them playing at the Emirates. So, Arsenal have lost 12 in a row against Man City in the Premier League. Probably not going to have a better opportunity of sort of stopping that sequence.
Do you think Arsenal will make that count? What's the bet for this one?
I think Saka's injury. If Saka plays, I'd maybe go Arsenal draw no bet.
Would let's say he's 75% fit, Mark. If you're Arteta, are you risking it?
Well, I think Arteta would, because there's an international break coming up, so he probably thinks, well, one more game, get him through. I'm going to go for the draw though, because even if he does play Saka, is he 100%? They've obviously had injuries in other positions themselves. We've spoken about Man City's injuries, but Arsenal haven't been firing on all cylinders. And I do think that a draw is not a bad result for either team. It shows Arsenal have moved on. I think City would gladly take a point given their injury and suspension issues, and sort of keep Arsenal at bay. And if it's sort of 1-1 with 20 minutes to go, I wouldn't be that surprised if both teams would not settled for it. You get into a stage where they're just popping it around in their own area and no pressure. But the risk and reward, I don't think, is there. To risk losing it to try to win it. So yeah, I think the draw is a big runner in this game.
Okay, looking forward to it. That's our big match ticked off. Let's get on to the rest of the Premier League card. And we'll start with the early kickoff on Saturday. It's Luton against Spurs. Luton 11-2, 15-4 the draw. Spurs 4-9. Are you off to this one, Mark?
I'm not. No, not off to Kenilworth Road. I mean, it's hard enough getting a ticket for any away game at Spurs. I mean, never mind one where the allocation's not going to be the biggest, is it? So no, I'll have to watch this one on TV. Tottenham will go top of the table if they win. So plenty of reasons to tune in.
Have you done an away at Kenilworth Road before?
I've not done an away at Kenilworth Road. I've been there as part of the press, and even that's not the most hospitable sort of trip. I've been there a few times doing games, and I think the last time was probably when I think it was Nathan Jones' first time around when he had James Justin. James Justin and I can't remember who the other fullback was, but he had his midfield diamond, and sort of the fullbacks were causing havoc, and it was good times. Hopefully they won't be celebrating in this one. Spurs have scored at least twice in every league game this season, but they do take risks at the back, so wouldn't be amazed if Luton got on the score sheet. Bad result for them in midweek against Burnley, though, losing by 2-1. They would have been hoping to have built on that first win that we saw last week against Everton.
Absolutely. Let's take a look at the next one then. They're going into the 3 o'clock. Burnley against Chelsea. Burnley 15-4, 3-1 the draw, 7-10 Chelsea. A much needed win for Chelsea on Monday night, Mark. And is that the start of better things to come?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm going to go for Chelsea to win this game. I mean, unexpected goals. I mean, Chelsea's season looks absolutely fine. They've won, in inverted commas, every game by that sort of XG metric, and that they haven't been able to finish their chances. They did finish them against Fulham, and generally speaking, if you just keep creating chances, you don't need to have Haaland up front to score them. You'll just score them organically. So, I felt Chelsea were fair enough to back to win this game. Burnley did get that big win against Luton, but they've lost their home games by an aggregate of 12-3 so far this season.
Okay, let's move on. Everton, Bournemouth. This is an intriguing one. 10-11 Everton, 11-4 the draw, 14-5 Bournemouth. What do we make of this, Mark? It's a tough one to call.
Well, I mean, I can't back Everton odds on. I mean, they've lost at home to Fulham, Wolves and Luton already this season. I mean, the Arsenal defeat was probably more expected, but the other three, not a million miles off what they're priced up, to beat Bournemouth, and they've lost them all. And then I look at Bournemouth, they've faced West Ham, Liverpool, Tottenham, Brentford, Chelsea, Brighton and Arsenal. That's a really hard schedule. So I'm not that surprised they're where they are in the table at the moment. They were leading in 3 of those matches, so it's not like they've been completely hopeless. If they get in front against Everton, I'm not sure Everton have got the sort of firepower nor that kind of crowd belief really to get back into the game. So I'm going to go for a Bournemouth win.
Okay, that's not going to cheer up the Everton fans.
No, they can practice some more booing.
Fulham against Sheffield United, 8-13 the home side, 14-5 the draw, 5-1 Sheffield United. Just in terms of Luton, Burnley and Sheffield United, Mark, which of those three are you most concerned for this season?
Well, Sheffield, yeah, it's got to be Sheffield. I mean, they lost players in the summer, didn't they? And it felt like they were probably a worse team than what they were in the Championship. They then brought in players late, but there's a lack of clarity over. If you look at Luton, Rob Edwards feels like he's in complete control. Unless things go disastrously and they lose every game, you feel like he'll be in charge no matter what next season. Everybody's pulling in the same direction. Vincent Kompany very much, again, pulls the strings at Burnley. He's got the authority there to kind of see it out, even if things get tough. Heckingbottom, his favourite in the sack race. Been lots of stuff about Chris Wilder potentially taking his job and returning to the club. Late transfer business. That 8-0 against Newcastle just doesn't bode well. It was a terrible performance, and yes, I probably fear most for them at the moment. And then in terms of this game, going for Fulham to win and under 3.5 goals, because while I say I fear for Sheffield United, that 8-0 was an anomaly really, because 2-0 at West Ham, 2-1 against Tottenham, 2-1 against Man City and Nottingham Forest, 1-0 against Crystal Palace. I don't fancy Fulham to thrash anybody, which is why I'm sort of going under 3.5 goals with the Fulham win. And Sheffield United can probably be competitive enough, but yeah, do fear for them at the moment.
Yeah, concerns for Sheffield United, concerns for Manchester United. This is the next game we're previewing. They take on Brentford at Old Trafford this weekend. 4-6 United, 16-5 the draw, 15-4 Brentford. Mark, when I was flicking through these prices this morning, I mean, you were saying you certainly couldn't back Everton at home at odds on. I mean, surely you can't be backing United at home at odds on, can you?
No, not really. If you, I said now, I said 5 defeats in 7. To Crystal Palace EFL Cup win barely counts in my opinion, because Palace were resting both their centre backs and Eze. So I mean, you've basically beaten Crystal Palace reserves. Well done. Galatasaray are not a good side, but in relation to Manchester United. So to lose that game, to twice be ahead, and we've already spoken about all the reasons that things are not right at United at the moment. So no, I think you can leave them off your sort of ACCAs for sure. Brentford haven't been very good either, I would say that, and they're missing Rico Henry and Ivan Toney, two of their best and most influential players. They've had 5 draws already this season. I think that's sort of tentative sort of look at the draw really in a game where not much stands out.
There was an energy about your voice before I mentioned Manchester United. Are you so just sick of talking about them?
There's just nothing new to say, is there really? I mean, it just feels like it's been like this for like a decade now, really, where they make 1 step forward and 2 steps back.
Nothing more to get energy back in the voice than previewing Crystal Palace against Forest. 6-5 Palace, 23-10 the draw, 12-5. Nottingham Forest, again, in my opinion, looking at this, a difficult match to split. Are you of the same thinking?
I am, yeah. I'm going to go for the another draw in this game. I mean, Eze's sort of suffered injury, isn't he now? Elise's not been fit. So I just wonder what sort of Palace's creativity and spark looks like. And they might lack inspiration. 5 of their 7 Premier League games have been under 2.5. So they don't put teams away even when they do win. Nottingham Forest have been very competitive so far this season. Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if this was a bit like that Palace Fulham game a couple of weeks ago that finished 0-0.
Let's go on to Sunday's games then. We'll start with the 2 o'clock games. We've already previewed Arsenal, Manchester City. That's the late game on Sunday. Brighton, Liverpool. Mark, where are we at with Brighton? I mean, in my kind of memory, the most recent games I've watched, their defeat to Villa and their Europa League opener. In both of those, just looking really kind of open and frantic, and that's not what I've become used to with De Zerbi.
No, I do wonder about the midfield. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, because like Caicedo, look, they got good money for him. They've been able to replace players before, but it doesn't mean that they won't miss him. And I've got concerns really over that midfield. At the moment, we saw young Inchelwood in there against Aston Villa with Billy Gilmore, and Villa were able to run over them at times. I know on the XG, it was nothing like a 6-1 game. It rarely is, and Villa seemed to get all the sort of close VAR calls go their way. On another day, maybe things are different, etc., etc. But Estepinian's injured as well, very important player, for Brighton. And you just wonder if maybe the games are, it's not ideal, is it, to play, twice a week? And they had the cup game against Chelsea. They're in Marseille on Thursday. They've conceded 6 at Villa. They conceded 3 at home to AEK Athens and West Ham. I'm going to go for a Liverpool win.
6-5. Yeah, the Liverpool win. Brighton 2-1 at home. We haven't seen them that price at home for quite some time.
True.
Let's take a look at West Ham against Newcastle, Mark. I mean, Newcastle just bouncing at the moment. 11-5 West Ham, 14-5 for the draw, 11-10 Newcastle. I guess there is this, this theory, and not just in football, but, particularly I was talking to Steve Palmer about the golf this week, and, he's avoiding all European Ryder Cup players because of the come down from that big event. Is there the risk that similar thing could be happening to Newcastle players this weekend?
Yeah, there's always the risk. I think it's probably less likely in a team event than it is, an individual one, because you're asking 11 players to feel like that, whereas maybe you rotate some of them out if you think that they are. I tend not to go too much for the psychobabble, because I just think you end up trying to attach it to the kind of bets that you want to put up, if that makes sense. Sure. You know what I mean? You're like, well, I want to do this, so there'll be, if you wanted to say put up Newcastle this week, they'll be inspired by that PSG win. Yeah, I think that's just generally how most of us punters work. I think in this game, I think it's a really tricky one. I'm going to go for a draw, and that's just because I think West Ham are an awkward side to put away. I mean, they've only lost twice in the Premier League. That was to Man City and Liverpool. According to the betting, that's the sort of best two teams in the league maybe this season. So, Newcastle will be hoping to be up there as well, but I don't think they're at that level, City and Liverpool's level. So, West Ham, not an easy team to put away.
Okay, positive start for West Ham this season. Let's take a look at our final Premier League game that we'll be previewing this week. It's Wolves against Aston Villa, 5-2 Wolves, 12-5 to draw, 11-10 Villa. A brilliant win for Wolves last weekend, Mark. Is that exactly what they needed to kickstart their season?
Yeah, it was. They've played well in a number of games this season, and in some games this season they've played well, not got the results. This time defended heroically, limited City to, not a lot of the volume of shots was high, but actually the quality of chance wasn't particularly high. And then in someone like Neto, they had someone that was able to take and carry the ball on the counter attack and hurt City. So I'm pleased for Gary O'Neill, because I thought he walked into a difficult job, and he's sort of doing reasonably well without necessarily getting the points on the board. In terms of this game, I'm going to go for both teams to score. It's happened in Wolves' last 5 games, and Aston Villa, I didn't expect this from Villa. Their games have been chaotically crazy so far. So a bit of spice on the fixture. Obviously Wolves hate West Brom, Aston Villa hate Birmingham. With both of them teams in the Championship, they kind of pick on each other now, Wolves and Villa. It's become the Midlands derby, if you like. So I think it'll be a tasty game, and hopefully goals at both ends.
Great stuff. I wonder if Dan Charles will be tipping up Birmingham this weekend. Let's hear from him now. All things EFL. If you want some free football bets this season, we've got you covered. Simply head to racingpost.com/free bets, and there you'll find over £200 worth of them for you to use this season. That's racingpost.com/free bets. Well, things are really starting to hot up in the EFL. To go through everything lower leagues, I'm joined alongside Dan Charles. If you've been a long-term viewer of Bets Club, you'll know that every week Dan puts up an EFL team in focus. It could be for the good, it could be for the not so good reasons. Dan, who are we going to be talking about this week?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Middlesbrough, and for good reasons. You wouldn't have thought that after the first 7 games. They were bottom after 7 games. I mean, you think that's only 3 games ago, and how people are talking about Sheffield Wednesday now, with Munoz being sacked and people thinking that they're almost certainties to go down. Well, 3 games ago, they were actually above Middlesbrough, which is quite incredible, really. But Middlesbrough since then have won 3 on the trot. They're up to 17th now. They're only 5 points off the playoffs, and for reasons that I'll go into in a second, I think they'll actually make those playoffs. You look at last season, they kind of had the disappointment in the playoffs, didn't they? They did really well under Carrick after he came in, challenged Sheffield United for a little while for that second spot, ended up in the playoffs, lost to Coventry, maybe a little bit of a hangover to mentally from that, but I think more importantly was losing the 2 front players. To lose Chuba Akpom, who went to Ajax, and Cameron Archer, who they had on loan. they just got, a stack load of their goals. And I think it's taken them a while to sort of adjust to that. Now, the answer kind of was from within. Josh Coburn, a young striker who was on loan at Bristol Rovers last season, he ended up being the answer. But at the start of the season, Carrick didn't really trust him, wasn't playing him. He did play his new signing. They got Emmanuel Latte-Lath, who they brought in for quite a bit of money. He was starting games and wasn't doing that well, had a slow start. But since they brought Coburn in and he made his first start in the game away at Sheffield Wednesday, they've taken 10 points from 4 games and shot up the table. I watched Coburn in the game at Watford last weekend where Middlesbrough won 3-2. And he's got so much potential. He's got real strength about him, good in the air, got a nice touch on him, took his goal really well, finished well. That was his first goal of the season. But when you watch a player and you just see their potential, I think he's going to go on and be a good player in the Premier League. I think he's going to be a real good player. He's only 20 years old. Bristol Rovers were raving about him. Barton was last season when he was on loan there, saying what a player with great potential he was. I can see it all myself. And what it's done, it's taken the pressure off of Latte-Lath that I was talking about. He was given a break from the side, and he's come back into the team off the bench in the week. And I watched his goal against Cardiff, and the pace that he showed and the skill to execute and finish, he looks like he's got ability as well. So the two of them now, I talked about those players I needed to replace, Akpom and Archer. I think that these two are going to get a lot of goals going through the rest of the season for Borough. So I think that problem has been addressed now. The other issue mentally, I think Carrick's done such a good job there. Earlier in the season, they were losing a lot of games by tight margins. And you looked at him after the games and he kept on coming on and there was never any panic about him at all. He was completely calm. It will turn. And that's kind of rubbed off on the players in the end. And a little bit like he was as a player. There'd be madness going around him. And he was the calmest player often on the pitch. He seems to be very similar qualities as a manager. And I think he'll take them close to promotion.
Yeah, and nice that they've stuck with Carrick, Dan, because they could have quite easily, changed route, couldn't they, at the start of this season? As you mentioned, it was a brilliant second half of last season. Really struggled at the start of the season. You're just wondering what's going on. Many people had tipped them for the top 6, if not automatics. You're looking at the bottom of the table, going, is Carrick all that he's made up to be? But clearly, dug deep and found something. So well done to Middlesbrough. What price would they be if you were to back them now for top 6, Dan? Have you got that on the top of your head?
I've not got the top 6 price. I've seen the promotion price, which was 8-1. The top 6 will be odds against, which you would say that's a good bet. But I actually think you wouldn't completely. I mean, Ipswich and there's a long way to go. Ipswich and Leicester have got a way to complete flyers, but there are a lot of points still to play for. And you think where they come back from last season to push Sheffield United. So I wouldn't completely say impossible top 2, but certainly I think top 6 they'll make. And for that reason, 8-1 for me for promotion looks a good price.
Yeah, that would be a remarkable turnaround. Dan on good form with his teams in focus so far this season. So keep an eye on Borough. Right, 3 selections for this weekend's EFL action. Dan, let's start in the Championship.
Yeah, we'll start with the team that I just touched on there. Ipswich home to Preston. I mean, there was a bit of sort of 8-11 around initially at home to Preston. That has gone now. It's 3-5. But I still think that's a pretty solid bet, really, for Ipswich to win this one. I mean, it's second against third, but I actually think this game will be quite one-sided. Ipswich, they look to me like early on in the season, I was wondering whether they could keep it going. I look at how they're playing now. They're playing excellent football at a fast tempo, and they're playing good sides, and they look tough to live with, especially at Portman Road. I mean, they come up against Hull, who were 8 games unbeaten on Tuesday, won the game 3-0 at a canter. They've got 15 goals now in 5 home games. I mean, that is, seriously, a fearsome sort of firepower that they're showing there. And Preston, I think they had that great start, didn't they? And it's kind of all gone a bit wrong recently. They lost 4-0 home to West Brom last weekend. Against Leicester, actually, on Wednesday, they kind of went with a low block and played on the counter-attack. And for an hour, they did pretty well. Then Leicester sort of got the goals late on, ended up winning 3-0. Preston, Ryan Lowe, the manager, admitted that his team were out on their feet towards the end. They've had a day less to prepare. When you've played away to Leicester and you're tiring towards the end of the game, the last thing you want 3 days later is a trip to Ipswich. So Ipswich for me to win that one.
Yeah, Ipswich Town going very well indeed. Let's take a dip down into League One, shall we, Dan?
Yeah, going to go with another high-flying team, Barnsley, in 4th place to win away to Exeter. You can back them to win, or you can take evens on the draw no bet, which I think is a real solid bet as well. Barnsley got the best away record in League One, 13 points from 5 games, including a 4-0 win at Cambridge on Tuesday. That was a really good result because Cambridge hasn't been an easy place to go this season. They've got 24 goals overall. They got 7, didn't they, in the first game when they beat Port Vale 7-0. But they kept on scoring goals, 24 goals. They've got Devante Cole's got 9 of them. He's a top scorer in the division. I just think that with that firepower, they're going to have a bit too much for Exeter. They've gone from first in the league to 10th after 3 losses on the trot. Their squad has been stretched a bit by injuries, particularly in defence. They lost 4-1 away to Charlton on Tuesday. And, when you're kind of struggling and got a few injuries, I think, to come up against an informed Barnsley is going to be tough for them. So Barnsley on the draw, no bet for me.
Okay, good stuff. And finally, Dan, I was peeking through your notes ahead of this podcast. A team you're about to mention, I think, have officially been on every show at some point. I mean, you absolutely love Crawley Town.
Yeah, I've actually left them alone from a betting point of view, in midweek. And I was right to do that. They lost 2-0 away to Doncaster on Tuesday. But I think they're going to bounce back here in a real high-profile game. They're playing at home to Wrexham. Now, the betting, I've mentioned before, the market's not catching up with Crawley. You can actually get just a shade of odds on for them on the double chance, Crawley or draw, double chance at home to Wrexham. The markets love Wrexham. They still don't like Crawley. I don't know why they don't like Crawley. The game at Doncaster on Tuesday, I always thought was going to be a tricky one. Doncaster have improved. I've mentioned them on previous shows that they're in a false position. They were going to improve. They're doing that, Doncaster. Crawley, Scott Lindsay actually took a chance with his team selection. He left 3 of his key players out. Dion Conroy, Ben Gladwin and Danilo Orsi were all left out on Tuesday. He wanted to freshen up the side and keep his options open and keep a chance of putting a stronger team out of the weekend. He took a chance thinking, maybe I can get a result at Doncaster and have a stronger team at home to Wrexham, but it didn't work. But he's going to have a strong team at home to Wrexham. They've got 5 wins out of 6 at home, Crawley. Wrexham, they're probably going to have a strong season, got the biggest budget, as everybody says, in the division. But they've not been performing that consistently. They drew 0-0 away to Mansfield on Tuesday. They were really lucky to get that. The goalkeeper, Arthur Okonkwo, is probably one of the best keepers in the league. He had a fantastic game there and really was responsible for rescuing a point. But it's another tough away game for them at Crawley. And I don't think they'll be as fortunate. I think Crawley could win the game, can at least get a point. So back Crawley, all a draw and a double chance.
Great stuff, Dan. Thanks as always.
You're welcome.
Always a pleasure to hear from Dan Charles. Right, let's get Mark's best bets for this weekend then. Mark, we'll start with a bet builder. Excited to see where you're going here.
Yes, I'm going to the Amex. I won't make the pun about it being a banker, but we're going to go for Liverpool to win, over 3.5 goals, and Nunez to score. So we'll break this one down. Liverpool to win. I thought they were excellent with 10 men and outstanding with 11 against Tottenham. Really looked a threat. Obviously lost the game very late on when they were reduced.
Any good with 9 or yeah?
No, I think once it went to 9, it was just, I mean, you can sort of say, well, the character was there and the spirit, and they defended for their lives, but they weren't able to sort of build up any attack.
They were brilliant with 10 against Newcastle, weren't they? Earlier on in the season.
They were. I mean, and I think that they have done some work in the midfield and managed Szoboszlai, absolute quality player. So yeah, I think Liverpool will enjoy the space that Brighton will give you to play. And if it becomes a basketball game, and that's why I'm going for over 3.5 goals, I would take Liverpool to come out on top, even though they've had problems against Brighton in the past. I mean, in terms of the 4 or more goals, I mean, all of Brighton's league games so far have been over 3.5, and Liverpool, one of the most attack-minded teams in the league. And then it was really about which one of the forwards did I fancy to score. I think Salah, Nunez, and Diaz will be the front 3, because obviously Jota suspended and Gakpo is injured. So I think we've narrowed it down to the front 3. And they were just gaping holes. Ollie Watkins just had so much space to exploit, didn't he, last week? And Nunez through the middle. I've liked what I've seen from him this season.
Love him.
He could be the one. He could be the one to benefit most. Wouldn't surprise me if all 3 of them got on the score sheet actually, or caused a lot of problems. I mean, it's pushing it a bit to say they'll all score, I suppose. But to really cause problems to that Brighton sort of team. I would just throw out there another sort of specials bet that I like this week before we move on to the treble. Over 9.5 shots on target in Luton v Tottenham. We've played a few of the Spurs shots markets already this season. That bet would have won in 6 of Tottenham's 7 Premier League games so far. They are involved in sort of end-to-end tussles, and I know Luton probably isn't the type of team that you'd necessarily associate with that either, but they might just get dragged into it by Spurs.
So that's over 9.5 shots on target combined, not just Spurs shots.
Although Spurs might fancy it themselves,
No, I've been really enjoying the times you put up those types of bets this season, Mark. So long may that winning run continue. A treble for this weekend. Let's do that.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll stick with Liverpool. I think it's a good matchup for them at the moment against Brighton, who are shipping so many goals. I'll go for Chelsea to beat Burnley. Chelsea XG says that they're doing better than the league table suggests, and I mean, I know it's fun to have a good old pop at Chelsea and Pochettino and Todd Bowley, but I don't think performances have been quite as bad as what the results have been. And then Wolves against Villa, both teams to score. So that's Chelsea to beat Burnley, Liverpool to beat Brighton, and BTTS in Wolves v Villa.
That comes out at about 5-1. Nice price for the treble. Let's get your best bet for this weekend.
So sticking with one of those actually, and it's Wolves v Villa, both teams to score. Neto has been dazzling for Wolves this season. I think he'll enjoy that Villa high line and sort of being able to get in behind that. Villa, of course, also got sort of Thursday night Europa League action, and the fact that they lost their first game suggests that they'll have to sort of take the second one more seriously. We're speaking before that, but that gives Wolves, I think, big encouragement, spurred on by that Molineux crowd. Expect them to go forward. But Villa's games have just been bonkers, really, this season. 7 league games, produced 29 goals. Ollie Watkins started the season slowly. Now he's sort of banging them in. But yeah, not sure about that high line. So the BTTS at Molineux on Sunday is my best bet of the weekend.
Excellent stuff. A comprehensive look at all of the weekend football, Mark. Thanks for that. If with you not off to Kenilworth Road, what have your weekend plans got in store?
I think it's there's a few family things. I've got 2 in terms of nieces and nephews. I've got 2 lots that are twins, and it's one lot of twins birthdays this weekend. So that'll be sort of not too early. I'll make sure I watch the Spurs game, but I might not watch Crystal Palace against Nottingham Forest, and we'll probably sort of head over to the niece's house for that. And then on Sunday, it's my nan's birthday. I mean, I'm lucky enough to still have a couple of grandparents that are still with us, and so we've strategically booked the table so that we'll be able to finish lunch and get back to watch at least the Arsenal Man City game. But I might miss Brighton against Liverpool. But sometimes you just got to do these things, haven't you?
Good genes in the Langdon family. Still kicking about. Excellent stuff. Big thanks to Mark. Big thanks to Dan. As always, there's been plenty of selections put up in this episode of Bets Club. Please don't ever feel the need to back them all. Only have a gamble with money that you can afford to lose. We will be back next week for another episode of Mark Langdon's Bets Club.